To serve this over any kind of pasta. So just whatever you have in the pantry, spaghetti, fettuccine, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to drop my noodles in, get those going. How are you today, Anne?
Sweet as pie.
Sweet as pie? You should say sweet as cake. Now always remember when you're dropping your pasta into the water that you get that noodle in there. Season it with a little bit of salt. It's really the only way to get some seasoning into that pasta. Now I mentioned we're going to use the old slow cooker, and this is one of those recipes. I swear by my slow cooker. If you watch the show, you know that, or if you have my cookbook. I just think that it's just, if you can get up 5 minutes earlier, and sometimes it's even less than 5 minutes, throw dinner in the slow cooker. You walk out the door, go to work or do your thing, run errands, get the kids where they need to be. You come home after a long day and you're kind of looking forward to it all day. You open the door and it's like, oh, the house smells so good, and dinner's done. All you have to do is drop the pasta, or you can cook the pasta ahead of time and heat it in the microwave. So this is just one of the ways that I roll, because I've learned that I have to do it we all have these crazy busy days. My daughter Ireland has after school activities. She's a dancer, and sometimes those practices go until 8:30 at night. And then if you don't have something going at home in your slow cooker, you're more apt to go out to eat, which can be really expensive, or hit a drive-through restaurant, which last time I went to one of those drive-through restaurants, lunch was like $25, $30. It wasn't for me, it was for the kids. So they're not cheap anymore, and it really can add up. So start using that slow cooker if you haven't been. And this is a fun, new, different slow cooker recipe. Now, one of the ways to keep cleanup even easier, which I'm also a big fan of, is, have you tried these slow cooker liners? You just find them near the foil and the plastic wrap in that aisle. And use one of these babies. You absolutely have no cleanup when it comes to scrubbing that slow cooker, and I love that. So seriously, give these a try. They really work wonderfully. Okay, you just basically line your crock pot. Now we're going to start dumping the rest of the ingredients in. We're going to do onion, just one onion that I've sliced up. It's going to cook low and slow all day, so I'm actually just used pretty big slices because I don't want them to disappear on me. I'm going to do some green pepper. You could also have some fun and do some other, like some of the colored peppers would be pretty in here. It's up to you. And again, they can be kind of chunky. That way you'll know after they cook all day that they're actually in there. And if you absolutely don't like green pepper, like I say, try some of the red, the yellow, or the orange peppers, which are really good for you and a little bit more mild, a little sweeter. Or leave it out altogether. But I always had the onion and pepper in my chicken cacciatore growing up. Okay, now we've got some boneless, skinless chicken breasts. You could also use thighs, the boneless thighs if you like. And I like to just chunk them up into pretty big pieces. I'm just going to use a fork and just kind of get them going this way. About anywhere, it depends how big the chicken breasts are. These happen to be ginormous, so we're using 3, but 4 to 6 chicken breasts. These are the Dad's boneless, skinless chicken breasts. And again, we're just going to kind of chunk them up so that you'll know they're in here. We don't need to make them too small, about 1 to 2 inch pieces. And then we're going to get those into our slow cooker, right on top of the onions and the peppers. I always buy the chicken breasts when they go on sale. Stock up, buy extra for your freezer, have the meat department at Festival wrap them in butcher paper, and then they'll stay nice and fresh in your freezer, protected with that extra layer of butcher paper for 3 months or even longer. All right, now, because we're not taking the time like my grandmother used to brown up the chicken breasts in oil and cook them that way on the stove, we're actually just going to dump them raw into the slow cooker. You really need to season them well, and that's one of my tips when it comes to making slow cooker meals taste really good, is whatever you're cooking, it really needs the proper seasoning. So we're going to season these really well with some garlic salt to give them some great flavor, some pepper. If you liked a little heat, you could do some crushed red pepper flakes. some oregano. Oregano's a little bit strong, so you don't need too much of that. And now we're just going to start dumping the rest of the ingredients on top. I'm using 1 jar of your favorite spaghetti or marinara sauce. I always, again, stock up with what's on sale, so it doesn't have to be the real expensive stuff. Dump it in there. And then one of my other little tips or tricks is there's usually so much sauce that's still left in that jar, so I'm just going to do a little bit, not a lot, because I don't want this to be a real runny sauce. A little bit of water to get the rest of that sauce out of there. Now, I've got a couple cans of tomatoes. I've got 1 can I'm using of the whole tomatoes. And I'm going to drain the juice out of that, again, because remember when, another tip to really good slow cooker meals is the liquid that it's going to be cooking in. So we've got a really flavorful liquid. We've got the tomato sauce, I've got some tomatoes. I'm using the whole. If your kids don't like the big tomatoes, you could use crushed or diced tomatoes. So this is going to give this chicken and everything in here some really great flavor. So dump that in there. One other thing for flavor, I love cooking with wine. In this case, just a dry red wine. Doesn't have to be the real expensive stuff. We happen to like, and at home sometimes, I'll just keep these little mini bottles of wine in my pantry, and they're great for use in recipes. And then you can just use what you need. So we'll do a little bit of dry red wine. This happens to be a Cabernet. Put the top on, screw it on tight, put it back in your pantry or your fridge, and then you've got a little bit of wine for the next recipe. The alcohol is going to cook out of here. You're just going to be left with some great flavor. If you don't like to cook with wine, you can just leave this out. It's not going to be a real big deal. But as I said, you don't have to buy the $20 bottles of wine when you're cooking. These are just, you know, $1.50 or so, and they really do add a lot of flavor. So, and I like to cook with dry wine. I get questions all the time when your recipes call for wine. I always am specific about a dry white or a dry red wine. Just if you're, you know, wondering what that means, and you're just starting to cook with wine, just ask in the liquor department. They'll be happy to steer you in the right direction. But normally a dry white wine would be a Pinot Grigio or a Chardonnay. You want to stay away from like the Riesling, and a dry red would be like a Cabernet or Merlot, Pinot Noir, something like that. But if this is all sounding a little, you know, like, or you're forgetting it when you go to try and pick out that wine, just ask. They're always there to help, and they'll sort you in the right direction. So at this point, the lid goes on. You're going to go out the door and do your thing. Let it hang out on low for 6 to 8 hours. Then you're going to come home and you're going to be like, oh, the house smells so good. I'm so glad I did this. I'm so glad I got up in the morning just a few minutes earlier to throw this all together. And if you'd like, at this point, while you're cooking the pasta, you can throw in some sliced mushrooms. You could also throw them in the morning before you leave, but they're really going to disappear on you then. So I like to throw them in maybe the last half hour or so of cooking, and then cook it, turn it up on high. And that's if you're a mushroom lover, and I am. And that way the mushrooms will kind of stay chunky. So I'm going to drain my pasta and show you how this all turned out. Every time I have this, it just reminds me of my grandmother. But she always did it the old-fashioned way. She didn't have a slow cooker, so I've tried to take a lot of her recipes and figure out a way how I can get those same great flavors, but just do it a little easier. Okay. So I'm using, fettuccine. Drain it really well. Love to serve this with garlic bread for dipping. And that's another thing. I try and keep, frozen garlic bread on hand in my freezer at all times, just to kind of round out that meal. And then let me show you how this chicken cacciatore comes out. It smells so delicious. And I think if you do cook with your slow cooker, you tend to make the same things over and over again. So this is something new and something different. And you can see the onions and the peppers and the mushrooms, and it's really nice and thick, and the chicken breast gets super duper tender. And you serve this like you would spaghetti, just the chicken and the vegetables right on top, and it's very healthy. You see, everything in here, we basically have, chicken and vegetables and tomato sauce, so nothing to feel guilty about there. And it's kind of that rib stick and comfort food, classic, and then you can certainly do a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top if you'd like.